The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time I decided to take the scenic route home. The countryside was always more calming than the highway, and I thought it would be a refreshing change. As I drove down the winding road, the trees seemed to grow denser and the night darker. It wasn't long before my radio began to emit a static-filled hum, interrupted by garbled whispers. I tried to change the station, but every channel was the same. Frustrated, I turned it off and settled into the silence. That's when I noticed my gas gauge was dangerously low. I cursed myself for not checking earlier. Then, as if on cue, the car sputtered and began to slow. I pulled over, my headlights casting an eerie glow on the road ahead. The car gave one last groan and died. I took a deep breath, attempting to calm my racing heart. Stranded on a desolate road was the last thing I needed. My phone showed no signal. Just my luck, I muttered, reaching for the flashlight in my glove compartment. The weak beam illuminated a path that led into the woods. Maybe, I thought, there's a house or a farm nearby. I began to walk, the crunch of leaves and twigs underfoot the only sound in the night. After what felt like hours, I spotted a faint light in the distance. As I approached, I realized it was an old, dilapidated house. The windows were boarded up, but one seemed to have been recently pried open. Curiosity getting the better of me, I decided to take a closer look. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of decay. Old family portraits lined the walls, their faces scratched out. I felt a chill down my spine. But the most unsettling discovery was in the living room. A circle of candles surrounded an old book, its pages filled with symbols I didn't recognize. Suddenly, a whisper echoed through the house. "You shouldn't be here," it hissed. Panic welled up inside me. I turned to leave, but my flashlight flickered and went out. In the darkness, I could feel something watching me. A cold hand gripped my shoulder, and I screamed, breaking free and running blindly towards the exit. I stumbled out of the house, gasping for breath, and didn't stop running until I reached my car. To my surprise, the engine roared to life. I sped away, leaving the haunted house far behind. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something from that house had followed me. I made it home safely, but every night since, I've heard the whispers. They're getting louder, and I fear that whatever I encountered on that country road is still with me, waiting for the right moment to strike.
Exhausted from a long day at work, I decided to take the coastal route home, hoping the sound of waves crashing would soothe my frayed nerves. The moonlight reflected off the calm ocean, providing just enough light to see the winding road ahead. As I passed a particularly secluded stretch, I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road, thumb outstretched. He was an ordinary-looking man, perhaps in his 40s, with a tired expression. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. He thanked me as he climbed into the passenger seat, explaining he had missed the last bus home. We chatted briefly, exchanging small talk. He mentioned he lived just a few miles down the road. After a while, he grew silent, staring out of the window. I glanced at him occasionally, finding his presence oddly calming. It wasn't until we approached a sharp curve that he suddenly whispered, "You might want to slow down here." Startled, I braked just in time to avoid a massive fallen tree blocking the road. I shuddered, thinking of the fatal crash that could have occurred. Turning to thank him, I froze. The passenger seat was empty. No sign of the man. Confused and panicked, I drove home as quickly as possible. When I reached home, still shaken, I shared the night's events with my elderly neighbor. She turned pale as she listened. She then told me a story of a man who had died on that very stretch of road years ago, warning others of the upcoming danger. He was always looking out for others, she said, even in death. I never took the coastal route again.
It was the rhythmic hum of the tires on the asphalt that kept me awake. The late-night drives were a ritual, a way for me to clear my head after long, grueling shifts at the hospital. The roads were familiar, each turn and bend etched in memory. But tonight, I felt an urge to deviate, to explore the old forest route that many had warned me about. It's not safe, they'd say, but the allure of the unknown was irresistible. The forest route was a narrow, two-lane road that cut straight through dense woods. The trees formed a canopy, making it almost tunnel-like. It was eerily quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustling of leaves. About halfway through, I noticed a faint glow up ahead. As I got closer, I realized it was a campfire. Around it sat a group of people, singing and playing instruments. Intrigued, I pulled over and approached them. They seemed friendly, introducing themselves as travelers who often camped in these woods. They invited me to join them, and I accepted, drawn in by their warmth and the mesmerizing tunes they played. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The travelers shared stories of their adventures, and I was captivated. But as the night deepened, their tales took a darker turn. They spoke of the forest's history, of settlers who had vanished without a trace, and of strange occurrences that locals dared not speak of. One of the travelers, an old man with piercing blue eyes, leaned in and whispered, "This forest has a way of trapping souls. Those who enter with heavy hearts are never seen again." A chill ran down my spine. I thought of my recent heartbreak, of the grief I carried. Was I one of those with a heavy heart? I thanked the group and decided to leave, but as I walked back to my car, I realized it was gone. Panic set in. The travelers offered to help me search, but it was in vain. Dawn was breaking, and the once friendly travelers now seemed different. Their faces appeared gaunt, their eyes hollow. The old man approached me, his voice now menacing. "You can never leave," he hissed. Desperate, I ran, the forest closing in around me. But no matter how far or fast I ran, I ended up back at the campfire. The travelers circled around, their chants growing louder. Suddenly, a bright light pierced the darkness. A truck's horn blared, jolting me awake. I was in my car, parked on the side of the forest route. The sun was rising, and there was no sign of the campfire or the travelers. Had it all been a dream, or a warning? I sped away, never looking back. The forest route remained a road less traveled, at least by me.